Welcome to Backstage Family Affair. Today's guest is Maestro Martin Piecuch. And now, here's Ethen.
I'm Ethen Reed. I'm here with Maestro Martin Piecuch.
Glad to be here with you. Yes, Ethen?
What sparked your interest in playing instruments?
Well, it's funny you should ask that because everything that so much that I've had to do with music has been serendipitous, which means you come into it not with any specific goal or in mind, you just sort of stumble onto it. In fourth grade, they gave a test to see whether to all the kids to pick the best likely kids to play an instrument, because they had 35 instruments they were going to rent for $5 a year. So it was a great opportunity, and so they wanted to give this so-called talent test, aptitude test, to see who would score the best. It really turned out to be an awareness test for music, and I didn't have any, so I didn't pass the test. My grandmother went up in our attic, up in Maine, in her attic, brought down my father's old saxophone. And I didn't even know he had one, and he had forgotten about it. And she said, "Take it home, let Martin play it." And I said, my father said, "No, don't bother, because he won't stay with it." And I said, "Why, Daddy?" Why? I said, "Well, everything you have is you use or play with it for 2 weeks, and then it stays in the corner." I don't guess that's anything like you ever did or something other kids would do. Yeah. But anyway, my grandmother and I worked on him, and they let me take it home. And when we took it home, he said, "But you have to promise you won't touch it until you can take it to school. It's a professional instrument, it's not a toy, and your band director has to show you how to use it." The first lesson worked like magic. I fell in love. I went home, I practiced everything he told me to do the next week, and so forth. And by the time the second month came around, I had caught up with the other kids that started in fourth grade that had been playing for 2 years. And rather than discourage me and say, "Just be patient, Martin, and wait, because you're caught up with the kids," he said, "I know how to fix this guy. I'll get him another instrument." So he got me a bassoon, and it is very difficult. It was a double reed instrument, and he was describing it, and he said it's about 8 feet long, and I said, "I'm only 4 feet long. How could I play that?" He said, "No, it's doubled up among itself." Anyway, I started studying that, taking private lessons with an elderly German man who lived in the next town, and I continued with the saxophone. So in another 2 or 3 months, I had the bassoon up to the level with the kids. I had caught up with them, and I was practicing 2 instruments now. So then I started on the clarinet, added that. I went to college, the University of Iowa, and I went there just for 1 year. I was on a full music scholarship when the oboe teacher at the school, who had just come out of the United States Marine Band in Washington, D.C., told me that they had an opening for saxophone. And he said, "Martin, I think you play well enough, you might be able to get in. Would you like to take an audition? If you would, I'll try to set it up for you." He did. So they had me prepare about a half hour's worth of music. I played it. Then they bring out a folder this thick, and they put it in front of you, and they say, "Play this." You're sight reading now. This is all the most difficult music in the band repertoire. "Play this, play that, play this." Well, 45 minutes later, they said, "Well, thank you, Mr. Piecuch. You've done a good job. We'll be in touch with you." I said, "You'll be in touch with me?" He said, "Yes, you're the 36th one we've heard, and we have 4 more we want to hear, and then we're going to make our decision." And I said, "I'm sorry that you can't tell me something now." I said, "Because I just rode a bus for 3 days from Iowa, and if you're not interested in me, I'm going to go try to play for the Air Force and the Navy and the Army." And they said, "Excuse us a minute." They went off and they talked, and then they came back and they said, Mr. Piecuch would like to invite you to join the United States Marine Band." Wow. So that's what happened right then. I was 18 years old.
how did you inspire other musicians?
Well, the teaching aspect has led me to a lot of experiences because I think I mentioned earlier, when the teacher is ready, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. So I had a lot of experiences that just came. I taught at Howard University after I got out of the U.S. Marine Band for 7 years, I guess, and I taught. I was to develop the symphony orchestra there, and I taught woodwinds. But we didn't have. We had some good brass and good winds, and not a lot of strings. We had a few good string players, but not enough to make an orchestra on its own. So I knew the conductor at the American University, which is on the other side of the city of Washington, where Howard is, and they had an orchestra of sorts, which had a good string. They had a lot of strings, but not so good brass and winds. So what a perfect marriage with Howard U and American U getting together. So we formed that orchestra, and it was the first one, a collaboration of that I had ever heard of. And it was pretty successful because what we wanted to do is not favor the whites or the blacks. Everything was very focused on keeping everything equality. So we would have a rehearsal at Howard once a week and a rehearsal at American U once a week. And then when we did our concerts, we'd do a concert at American U, and their conductor would conduct it, and then we'd do one at Howard, and I would conduct it. I continued teaching private lessons and playing professionally in the theaters, and among my students were my own children. I had a daughter, flute player, and a son who plays saxophone and bassoon and clarinet. And I started him on clarinet when he was in he was in second grade at 6 or 7 years old. He was so little he couldn't sit on his little chair because the clarinet bell hit the floor, so he had to play standing up. And by the time he was in 6th grade, he was very good, playing the Mozart flute concerto and playing tenor sax. And like me, when I was at that age, I was reading music really well, and I didn't know how to play jazz. So he then, I formed a jazz ensemble in my basement, a 16-piece jazz band we rehearsed in my basement called the Kaleidoscope, and he played the jazz tenor book in there, and that's how he learned to play jazz. Well, this band was a community band. It really caught on well, and I had some workings with some of the inner city kids in Washington, and we went to a summer camp, and included in the kids that we went to camp with, Frostburg State Teachers College gave us their space for free, and the kids all chipped in and paid some money to go to the camp, and we even had some scholarships for some of the kids. And Wallace Roney, who's a very famous trumpet player right now and very good. He's a protege of Miles Davis, and his younger brother Antoine is a saxophonist, and so they were in amongst the camp. And every night we had concerts. The faculty would play concerts, and the students would play, and the improv was going on. And so the teaching had a chance to let me touch a lot of different lives.
Would you rather conduct or string instruments?
Well, I conduct them all. In a symphony orchestra, you have more strings than winds. And in a concert band, the U.S. Marine Band, which I actually got invited to go and conduct that band after I got out of the band. I conducted the band at the White House with the American Light Opera Company. That's a whole other story. But actually, concert bands are wind and brass and percussion. And then symphony orchestras are full string sections, violins, violas, cellos, basses, and then all the winds and brass. And I love conducting them both.
What made you want to conduct string or wind instruments?
We said things happen by accident, right, to me? So I'm in my senior year of high school. I was in January, the month of January, I was skating backwards in our outdoor rink, and I landed stiff-armed on the ice and hurt my wrist. I didn't know that I had broken my wrist. So we went on, and I was tending it for 2 or 3 months and dealing with it, and was pretty sore. Then the pain sort of went away. Then I went out for tennis, and the first forehand I hit struck a new set of nerves, and all of a sudden, pain. Had to go to the hospital right then. They set the wrist, and they put it in a cast, and I couldn't play for another 3 months. My senior year in high school, and I can't play my senior concerts, and we were doing a musical, Brigadoon, like a Broadway musical, and the band director said, "You know what? You can conduct. You can't play. You be the conductor." And I was conducting with a cast on my arm, but I conducted that. And he said, "I'll show you what to do." And he showed me the beat patterns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and I kind of like that. Hey, when I do this, they do that. They play. Well, I'm in charge. I see the conductor is the leader, and I got to find out that I could ask them to play something in a different way, and it would get better. That's what a conductor does. That's what a teacher does. All of a sudden, I found myself really in the element. I loved it. And so that was always in the back of my mind then, conducting and doing things. I was leading the jazz bands there and doing other things that put me in that leadership. And so I gradually went into conducting after I got out of the Marine Band.
Wow, thank you. I played the flute and the saxophone. Which do you prefer?
That's a good question, because just like you have friends and you work with different family members, you don't love them more or less than the others particularly, but somebody does one thing better, then something is just right for something. Like flute music is really good on a flute. Saxophone music is good on a sax. I tend to like whatever instrument I'm playing at that time, so that I can focus on it. So I don't really, as far as, I play all of the woodwinds, flute, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, and sax. Of all of them, I play the saxophone the best, and I've played it the longest. And beyond that, now I've let pretty much the bassoon and oboe playing, I just don't do them anymore. I gave my oboe to my granddaughter, and I still have my clarinet, but I don't play it very much. But I'm keeping up on the flutes and the saxophones, and that's what I'm playing professionally these days.
Did you write your own music?
It's very hard for me because I had to, if you're going to be a composer or a writer, you have sort of the opposite skills that I do. Instead of being gregarious and outgoing and talking, as a composer, I would be happier going off inside a closed room and just work. But I could never do that because I always had to come out and teach or go play a job or do something else. So it was so hard to sequester myself long enough to write anything. I just really never took to the writing.
genres. Why is that?
Well, I think, as I mentioned earlier, I've been curious about learning everything I could about everything I can. And when I was in junior high school, and I started playing, they started a jazz band then, and which we didn't have for my son, so I had to start the band, but I had the opportunity to play in the junior high school jazz band, and I found out that I was reading, but then there was an improvisational part about it, and improv, and I had my teacher saying, well, trying to explain it. He says, well, sing da 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 dee da da. He said, I mean, play it. I said, what are the notes? He said, you tell me. You guess. Use your ear. Da 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 dee da da. I'm on my saxophone. Da da dee da da. I found the notes, and he said, you just played by ear. I did. And so I didn't realize that that one has that skill, that you translate it, you go beyond the intellectual concept of three fingers makes a G, and a G sounds da, but rather you heard the note, your fingers just went to it. And that began my understanding of jazz. I came to love it and to worship the people that played it so well, like Cannonball Adderley. Charlie Parker began it all. That is the bebop. Cannonball Adderley, Charlie Parker, Cannonball Adderley, Phil Woods. These were my idols. I would never, ever be able to play as well as they do. I can aspire to it. And so that made me have sort of a parallel career in jazz and in classical or symphonic music. So now, today, I discovered that what I really am is a fusionist, because I have had a fusion of classical, maybe even a confusion of classical and jazz music. And if you'll hand me that CD right there, I can refer to this as I discovered that I am a fusionist, and I put out an album recently called Jazzical Fusion, where I'm playing flute and piccolo and bass flute and soprano sax and alto sax with a pianist who is a wonderful jazz player and blues player, but he's also a great classical player. So somebody like me, and a guitarist who plays flamenco music, he plays classical guitar, he plays rhythm and blues, he plays jazz. So here comes the fusion. Usually you hear the term fusion referring to rock and jazz fusion. So this, I think, is one of the first jazzical fusion of classical and jazz. Now, musicians have been playing jazz on classical tunes for years, but we're taking that to a different level in here, where we're taking international music and with tangos and Brazilian music and mixing folk genres along with that and fusing it into a jazzical dialogue with, for an example, we play the love theme from Romeo and Juliet. Da 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 dee da dee da da, such a romantic, beautiful tone. I love conducting that piece, and then we fuse it with the Angel Eyes, the beautiful Matt Dennis tune. Angel Eyes, da 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 dee da da, da dee da 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 dee da. There's such a similarity to those melodies. Now, Tchaikovsky came much before Matt Dennis, and I don't think Matt Dennis deliberately did anything to copy, because it's not a copy. But on the other hand, I'll bet Matt Dennis listened to Tchaikovsky, and he has some Tchaikovsky in his heart, and it came out through his writing. So jazzical fusion is what we're doing now. I'll mention my website if I can, which is my name. So the most difficult part about this is remembering and spelling my name. It's Martin, M-A-R-T-I-N, Piecuch, P-I-E-C-U-C-H.com. That's Martin Piecuch.com.
How did you learn to conduct music?
At first, we talk about SOTP, seat of the pants, which is just the training that, I mean, you try something, and if it works, you do it again. And if it doesn't, there's a saying that if you are doing the same thing and expecting to get different results, that's one of the definitions of insanity. To do the same thing over and over and expect to get different results. So if I did something and it didn't work, I would try something else. It wasn't until I got into studying in college that I actually took conducting lessons. I studied with Frederick Fennell, one of the best, but I was age 39 when I got to do that. I'd been conducting for 20 years. And then at that point it was great because I knew what I was doing, and then I knew what a great artist this man was. So I knew what he had to offer me, and he gave it to me, and I got it. And there's a saying too that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I was, and he did. And I had the opportunity I conducted the Washington Symphony for 10 years, and in the process I was invited to conduct in Russia. I went there, I've been there 18 times in the last 22 years, and conducting each time 2 or 3 weeks at a time, sometimes 4 weeks. All the Russian orchestras, me learning, I now, я говорю по-русски, I learned to speak Russian and work with those orchestras. It's been fabulous experience working with the Russian musicians. And then I got a chance vicariously to conduct in France, in Germany, Austria, Hungary, Czech Republic, Korea, 6 times in Korea. In Japan, I didn't get a chance to conduct, but I sat in a jazz club it was the largest jazz club I've ever seen. They had about 500 people that they held in the jazz club. It was full. There was a 4-piece group on stage. None of them spoke any English. I didn't speak any Japanese, but I had my soprano sax with me. I went up on the stage and I just showed them, and they invited me up, and I said, blues? Blues? And they understood that. And I said, B flat? They didn't know what B flat meant, so I showed them the key on the piano, and we were off. And so I sat in, and these are just fabulous experiences from traveling. I would encourage everyone, no matter what your profession ends up being, travel the first time you can to get over and see how other people do it. If everybody in the U.S., if everybody in the world had to travel in their early life, I don't think we'd have the wars and the fights and the disagreements that we have now, because other people would meet on an understanding and have this fabulous exchange.
Sit back and enjoy this wonderful version of Johann Sebastian Bach's Air on a G string, which is fused with Antonio Carlos Jobim's Samba de una Nota Soy.
experience this has been for me to work with the youth and vivaciousness and promise that you have going into your career and taking your own musical experiences, and maybe I've motivated you to go and get a little more curious about those too.
Thank you, you have. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I'm Ethen Reed on Backstage Family Affairs with Maestro Martin Piecuch.